Chapter 9. Get out of the darkness and into the light. I was turned away from the last rehab facility in Georgia that even considered working with crack addicts. Nobody wanted to work with people like me because of the high failure rate. I heard from a drug counselor, as he turned me away, his reasoning on the whys of this. He said the government wasn't going to give money to anybody that wasn't showing success in their programs. It wasn't in the facility's best interest to treat someone who couldn't win the battle anyway, because the centers and the doctors would go broke. Then they wouldn't be any good to anybody. So they turned us away. That's what they used to do to cancer patients, send them home to die. At least they did until enough children of cancer victims became doctors and researched cures. Then when enough of the right people had felt the pain, the attitude of the country shifted. Cancer treatment facilities began to appear in hospitals everywhere. It became financially lucrative to the pharmaceutical companies to manufacture the chemicals with which to treat them, so they developed more treatments. Now, the battle of cancer carries more hope than despair, and with the hope comes a higher survival rate. With hope comes life. The treatment center was in a small town in southern Georgia. It's even on the map. I don't know why it's there, but it is. You could find it if you wanted to. Just look for the pine trees and the red clay soil. There you'll also find a special breed of people. It mattered not that I had been accepted before showing up at the door. It didn't matter that I even showed up on time, with 30 minutes to spare, actually. You see, the man that had given me permission to come and claim my bed, the manager, went back out on the streets between Friday, when I called, and Monday, when I arrived. The owner, a crotchety old gentleman, was called out of retirement to fill in until a suitable replacement could be found. I don't think he liked that very much. As he sat in his glider looking out over the freshly plowed fields and shooting the groundhogs that raised their heads, he proceeded to shoot down every reason why I was a good candidate for his treatment. 9 months of treatment? No problem. Give me my life back and I'll give you what's left of it in return. Money? Well, I don't have any of that, but I can get it for you. You want $300 a month? I'll get you $3,000. Just let me use the phone for an hour and I'll prove it. I've done fundraising and I'm good at it. What, no room? No problem. I'll sleep on the lower 40. I'll eat dirt and you won't even know I'm here until meeting time. I want to live again and you're my last hope. No, no. And again, no. Just to emphasize the futility of my plight, he went so far as to tell me that there wasn't a state in the union that would take me either. They don't want somebody else's problems, he told me. Then he shot a groundhog, as if to emphasize the fatality of my situation. I took the hint. No more talk. No more pleading. This was not the place for me. Somehow the fates had conspired to remove this step from my destiny. Strange, isn't it, how things work sometimes? What you think is where you're going is not, in fact, where you wind up. It is my belief that God lets us think what we gotta think to get done what we gotta get done. Then we pick up the pieces left of our expectations, if there are any, and move on. That's what I did. First, I showered, put on my best clothes from top to bottom, and pulled out of the place that offered me my last hope. It was there that I woke up to something else. The special little something that this book is about. That feeling of rightness. The little voice that always speaks the truth. At the end of a driveway in the backwoods of southern Georgia, I cried into the nothingness around me. The tears fell and I prayed, if you want to call it that. I made a vow right there and then I would not move from that spot until I knew in my heart what direction an unknown God wanted me to take. I looked to the left down a blacktop highway lined with tall, spindly pines and red dirt. I watched my tears fall on the steering wheel. I tried to look to the right, but I couldn't. Then, looking back to the left, I said aloud, well, that must be the way you want me to go. That's when I first felt it. Hope. I felt just a little bit better. To me, it was like rain in the middle of the desert, an oasis from what turned out to be a mirage. The similes go on and on. Basically, it was life where I had become convinced that there was only sterile soil. Where did this renewed power come from? How could light come to someone in the midst of the greatest darkness of their entire life? Somewhere in the mountains of Tibet there is a castle. A monastery, really, but that just describes the use to which the structure is put. The building itself is a castle surrounded by many castles where the habitués live. Here there be monks. In this place, at certain times of the day and evening, when everything goes quiet, you can feel the earth begin to vibrate. If you sit quietly in the gardens, the birds even refuse to speak. The sky seems to glow a bit more brightly around the escarpments, and something changes about the place. The energy changes. What happens to precipitate this change is simple, really. It's a bunch of people sitting around in circles or kneeling in a common room with every voice rising on a certain note. The monks believe the tone to be the sound of creation. I heard a story about these monks who, by the power of their voices alone, could levitate objects. The story was related to me about a doctor who had visited them to seek out their healing techniques. While there, he witnessed the monks in their garden, who had declared to their visitor they were going to move this boulder to a more balanced location, ostensibly to improve the level of peace where the flowers grew and the acolytes meditated. At a pre-designated time, about 15 of these monks gathered in a circle around the offending piece, encompassing not only the boulder, but its intended location, and 2 other monks who would guide the rock to its new resting place. Almost as one, the monks closed their eyes and began to moan. As the vibration mellowed into a single note, don't ask me which one, the boulder raised off the ground and was guided some 10 feet without sweat or mechanics of any kind. Then, as the tone changed slightly, the boulder gently lowered to the ground, where I'm sure it still rests today. There is power in sound. Maybe when I voiced my intent to sit at the end of the driveway until my directions came, somewhere in the universe something heard me and responded. Maybe that something listened, seeing the state I was in, and helped. When it helped me by giving its urgings to turn left and I listened, it was pleased. Well, maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't. Whatever it was real, and was made more visible to me by voicing the desires of my heart. And so I left Georgia. Broke, alone, in a car that didn't really belong to me, feeling the first rays of hope in forever when I ran across the little town of Ponce de Leon, Florida. There wasn't much left of Ponce then. A diner, a church or two, and a little second-hand store. The bearings on my left front tire were squealing something fierce on the highway. That's what prompted my stopover. Of course, and like always, there was more at work around me than I knew at the time. In my car were all of my remaining possessions, some clothes, a little food, an atlas of the United States, my journals, and a pair of sunglasses I'd stolen from an associate for whom I had smuggled, the vestiges of my former life. My tools consisted of 2 screwdrivers, a pipe wrench, and a pair of pliers, so fixing the bearing was out of the question. So was continuing until the necessary repair was made, so I stopped. I went looking for a church. What I found was a sign that declared their small Baptist church was in need of a pastor. There were some good folks there having their Wednesday night service, leading themselves as they worshiped their God in their own way. I stumbled in, probably looking like death warmed over, and sat down in one of the rearward pews. I just wanted to stop for a while and give thanks for whatever had released me from my bondage. As the service was letting out, I talked to a few people, but it wasn't in my heart to tell them of my situation. Well, I didn't tell them any more than I'd just arrived and was heading west. That's all I really knew at the time, besides the fact that for the first time in my life, I was alive. After the service, I pulled my van out of the grassy parking area and headed into town. There, I parked in front of a second-hand store and bedded down for the night. A lot of stuff happened the first few nights of my new life. Everywhere I turned, I looked for the light. I looked for the light, and I found it in the eyes of almost everyone along the way. And everyone along the way shared their light freely, according to the gifts they had received. I guess it was then that I started to notice a change in the way I looked at people. I can't really say how it was before, because it's like I was someone else. Someone else in the same body starting out in a new life with what the other guy had left me when he was done with his turn. Whatever I had changed from, I had begun to see joy. Now, a funny thing about that change, the one to looking for the light. Not only did it seem to grow in me, but I found more and more people that seemed to outshine the sun. I know what you're thinking right about now. You're thinking it was only there because I was looking for it. Well, you're right, of course, but does that really matter? Does it really matter whether it was there before I looked or not? I don't think so. You see, the only thing that really mattered then as it does now is that it was there when I looked. The light was there when I needed it. Granted, I had to exert a force of will to get to it, but maybe that's the way it always is. Maybe we're supposed to be exerting force to see it. Maybe, just maybe, when we open up to the need we have for it, the joy we find in it, it'll appear. It fed me because I needed to have it, and I knew it, or I would die. I found one thing more as a result of that day and the days that followed. That was when I looked into the eyes of a stranger and didn't see the light, that all I had to do was share mine, and theirs would come out. It would come, and more times than not, it would appear to be almost shocking to the ones who could change so much with nothing but a smile shared between strangers. For me, I can claim no greater joy than that of playing some kind of role in the awakening of a soul to its innate happiness. Just under the surface, waiting to be seen beneath the clouds of the day-to-day, to spring up like a flower in the desert, just like I did, just like you have, just like you will again. Now we come to today's lesson, class. I've told you another piece of the puzzle of Ron. The piece that tells of my awakening, how it came at the hands of strangers through the most unlikely and challenging of situations. How I learned to look for joy in order to find it, and how I found it in the eyes and hearts of the people I met along my path. And I told you of the effect it had on strangers less fortunate than I. Less fortunate, because at the moment of our meeting I had joy, and they did not. Your next assignment is to look around you today. Look around you tomorrow. Look at the people in your path for what they have of this precious commodity. Then, if they're a little brighter than you, thank them for their gift. If they're not so bright, share yours. And then, you guessed it, thank them for their sharing as well. It takes only a moment at each passing, but the rewards will last 2 lifetimes, yours and theirs. After all, I'm living testimony to the process. Remember, all you have to do is tell these strangers, "Thanks for sharing your smile with me. I feel better for having seen you today." Then, just walk away. I guarantee they'll remember you forever. I do.